The path to a meaningful life is never smooth. It's marked by setbacks, struggles, and moments of doubt.
Ow.
But every stumble is not a defeat. It's a stone paving the road toward an unbreakable mind. Failure is not the end. It's the beginning of growth. Each mistake carries wisdom. Every fall hides a lesson. Question is, are you ready to embrace failure as your greatest teacher? Resilience is more than a trait. It's a daily choice, a decision to rise no matter how many times we fall. To live without limits is to break free from the fear of mistakes and step boldly into the truth that we are capable of far more than we imagine. Every step forward, no matter how small, is proof of our strength. So when life knocks you down, remember, our true legacy is not measured by trophies or titles, no, but by the inspiration we ignite when we rise again and again. Mental demons. Know your inner shadow. Anonymous author. The origins of resilience. Childhood in the darkness. Sometimes the greatest trials come when we barely have the strength to understand what's happening around us. Why, when we are so young, must we face pain, uncertainty, or fear? What is the purpose of all this today? I want to tell you about the first years of my life, when resilience was something I didn't even know I had. I remember those long nights full of silence, broken only by screams and fear. In that era, all I knew was that the world was big and cold, that my desires seemed insignificant, and that my hopes were extinguished before they could fully form. Living was like walking on a path without light, where every step seemed like a risk. But somewhere an inner force pushed me to keep going, even though I didn't know where I was headed. Why do some people face so much pain from such a young age? It's a question I've asked many times, not just in my mind, but in my heart. Sometimes, life simply puts us in situations that seem impossible to overcome. Perhaps it's because it's in those moments of darkness that we find something deep, a spark that gives us strength. And that spark, no matter how small, can be enough to keep us on our feet. In my case, that spark was the longing to be free, to get out of the emotional prison I was in. I knew I wanted something more, even if I couldn't define it, and every day I clung to that idea. This isn't all there is. There must be something more beyond this pain. That belief was like a lighthouse in the night. What's the point of remembering those difficult moments? Sometimes we believe that remembering is reliving the pain, but in reality, it's a way of understanding our origin. Looking back, I see that each of those moments taught me something essential. I learned that fear, while it paralyzes, is not eternal. That pain, while it burns, has the capacity to transform into strength if we find a way to face it. And that darkness, while persistent, is never totaled. There is always a glimmer of light, if we know where to look. As I grew, I began to discover what I now call resilience. It was nothing more than the ability to keep going, to stay on my feet. When circumstances wanted to knock me down, I learned to be strong not because someone taught me, but because life itself demanded it of me day by day. I told myself that this lost child would one day be someone capable of guiding others. How do you turn difficult experiences into something positive? That's the key, isn't it? To take what hurts us and turn it into something that strengthens us. I learned that the answer was not in avoiding pain, but in accepting it. Only when we accept it can we understand it, and when we understand it, it loses its power over us. That's how I transformed my fear into courage, my pain into purpose. Over the years, I have discovered that every difficulty I faced in those dark days was a potential lesson. It was as if life, through its blows, was preparing me for something greater, something I didn't yet understand. Because every tear, every sleepless night, every emotional wound was like a brick. One more piece in the construction of my inner strength. What can we learn from difficult childhood experiences? I believe that all of us on some level have had moments that have marked us deeply. These experiences teach us lessons that cannot be learned in books or schools. Lessons of strength, patience, and resilience. They remind us that we are capable of much more than we think. Today, looking back, I see that those dark years were the foundation of the life I wanted to build. It was they who taught me the power to resist, to stand firm, and not to give in. In that era, I didn't yet know that I was building a resilience that would accompany me my whole life. Is it possible to heal the past? Healing doesn't mean forgetting or erasing what we've lived. Healing is remembering without pain. It's being able to see the past as a lesson that made us stronger. We all carry scars, and each one tells a story. By accepting them, by seeing them as reminders of what we have overcome, we find a new strength. Breaking the chains, the escape from family violence. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is choosing freedom when the world seems to tell us that we don't deserve it. Life taught me that on occasion we must break the chains that bind us, even if those chains are the closest bonds. In the end, each of us deserves to live in peace, no matter the emotional cost of leaving a part of our life behind. How do you know when it's time to leave? That's a difficult question, one that many people face in silence. Sometimes it seems impossible to recognize the exact moment, the instant, when you can't take it anymore. But the truth is that when that point arrives, something inside you screams. It's a soft but persistent voice that says, you deserve something better. I listened to that voice for years, ignoring it at first, thinking I had to accept the life I had. But over time, it became impossible not to listen to it. For me, the moment to decide to leave came after a night of violence and screams that seemed to fill every corner of the house. The tension was in the air, as if it were a weight resting on my shoulders. That night, I saw my mother look at me with a mixture of sadness and determination. Her face was a mirror of my own. We both knew we deserved something more than the life we were living. I looked at it all, and I understood that it was time to free ourselves. What does it mean to break family chains? It means having the courage to step out of the area, even if what's outside terrifies you. Breaking those chains is not an act of rejection, but of self-love. For a long time, I thought I had to endure everything just because they were my family. But the true lesson was to understand that although love unites us, we should not accept that which hurts us at that moment. My mother and I became companions on an uncertain journey, and that bond, based on understanding and support, was what gave us the strength to leave. The night we finally left the house was like the first breath of freedom. I still remember every detail, the sound of the door closing, the cold breeze that hit our faces, and the feeling of liberation that overwhelmed us. But there was also fear, a deep fear, like the one you feel when crossing a bridge you've never stepped on before. We knew we were heading into the unknown, but we preferred it to remaining in a place that was consuming our peace. How do you face the fear of the unknown? It's a question that inevitably arises in these moments. When you take a step toward freedom, fear is always there like a shadow. But I learned something in that instant. Fear is not our enemy. It's just a reminder that we are alive, that we are feeling. And every time we face that fear, we become a little stronger, a little freer. That night, I promised myself that I would not let fear dictate my life. As we walked toward a new life, a mix of emotions flooded me. I couldn't help but feel a deep sadness for everything we were leaving behind, for the invisible wounds we were carrying. But there was also hope, a timid hope that peeked out with every step we took. It was in that moment that I understood that every ending is also a beginning, and that sometimes the most important beginnings come after the darkest moments. How can you start over after so much pain? That's a question we all ask ourselves at some point. Starting over means accepting that we deserve peace, that we deserve to build a life from respect and love. Although it may seem difficult at first, each day that passed after our departure was a battle between the desire to return to the known and the need to move forward. But I learned to trust in the process, that each step was part of my healing. The escape from that violent life was only the first step of many more to come. It was a silent declaration that even though pain may mark us, it does not define us. Breaking those chains was, in a way, the purest act of freedom I could have experienced. Since then, every day has been a reminder that true strength comes when we choose self-love above all else. What lessons can be learned from this experience? Perhaps the most powerful lesson I learned was that we deserve peace, and that each of us has the right to seek it, no matter the cost. Freedom has a price, and sometimes that price is leaving behind people, places, or moments that were significant at some point, but no longer have a place in our lives. Today, as I remember that escape, I feel a deep gratitude. It was in that decision, In that act of courage, that my true path toward resilience began. The scars remained, yes, but so did an unbreakable determination. Because in the end, scars only remind us that we have been able to heal and move forward. Internal and external demons, struggles of youth, they say that we all face demons at some point in life. That they are those invisible obstacles that challenge us and divert us from our path. For many, youth is a stage of dreams and discoveries. But for others, as was my case, it is also a time of internal and external storms. Of battles that don't always have witnesses, but that leave deep marks on us. What is a demon? Aquitaines, La Traduction, Al Ingalls, Del Texto, Q, Prop, or CIO and asked. An internal demon is the enemy that lives within us. The one who whispers doubts and plants fears. Internal demons are those thoughts of inadequacy, the insecurities, that corner us and make us feel small in an immense world. They are the memories of moments when someone told us we weren't good enough, or when we ourselves became convinced we would never achieve our dreams. My internal demons were born from those early experiences, from the echoes of a broken childhood and the uncertainty of a future that seemed unattainable. Each day was a struggle between the voice that told me I should keep going and that other, more subtle and dark voice that whispered it wasn't worth trying. Why try if the world always seems to be against me? How can you fight something you can't see? That's the big question. Internal demons are deceptive, because although you can't see them, you can feel their weight. Every insecurity, every fear that arises for no apparent reason, is a reflection of those invisible enemies. I learned over time that to defeat them, I first had to face them. I could no longer run from them or hide in the places where I used to find refuge. The only way to defeat an internal demon is to look it in the face and understand where it comes from, why it's there. There were moments when I felt that life was overwhelming me. It seemed that every external difficulty, every problem, awakened those internal fears that reminded me of my own limitations. There were nights when I felt I was fighting a battle I couldn't win, that every effort was useless. However, each dawn gave me a new opportunity to try again. And what about external demons? They're those challenges in people who test our resilience from the outside. They can be difficult situations, unexpected obstacles, or even people who don't believe in us. I remember during my youth the rejection and mockery I received, and how those experiences built an invisible wall between the world and me. I became distrustful, with my armor always up, waiting for the next blow. One day, as I was walking home, a group of boys began to hurl insults at me, mocking who I was and what I looked like. I felt a mix of rage and powerlessness. For a moment, I wanted to react, but something stopped me. I understood that if I gave them power over me, they would win, so I decided I would not allow them to dictate how I should feel or how I should react. I learned that sometimes the greatest strength lies in ignoring those who seek to break us from the outside. How can you build strength in the midst of so much pain? That's a question I constantly ask myself. Strength doesn't arrive suddenly, nor is it something you can build overnight. It's like a muscle that we must train daily. I realized that every time I chose not to give in to my demons, I was gaining ground. Every small victory, every day I decided to get up despite everything, strengthened my spirit. I learned to look inward, to observe my own thoughts and emotions, and to question them. Why do I feel so much fear? Where does this insecurity come from? Little by little, as I explored those questions, I realized that many of my struggles were the product of my own internal dialogue, of the stories I told myself about myself. Is it possible to completely defeat internal and external demons? The truth is that the demons will always be there, to a greater or lesser extent. But the important thing is not to eliminate them completely, but to learn to live with them, too. Recognize them and not give them power. Over time, I understood that those demons are part of our humanity. They remind us of our weaknesses, but also push us to seek strength. I learned to see every challenge as an opportunity to grow. In this stage, I discovered something fundamental. Every internal and external struggle had a purpose. Every demon was actually a teacher who taught me lessons of resilience, patience, and self-knowledge. What I once saw as obstacles, I began to see as necessary on the path to my own development. What is the most valuable lesson from this struggle with demons? I think the deepest lesson is that of acceptance. Accepting that life has its ups and downs, that each of us faces our own invisible battles. True strength is not in living without fears or insecurities, but in learning to live with them and move forward despite everything. I learned that internal and external demons do not define me, that I can decide every day how to react to them, that I have the power to be who I want to be. The weight of racism and its emotional scars. Some wounds are invisible. They aren't seen on the skin or bleed like physical wounds, but they are there, deep, accumulating in the heart. We grow up in a world that sometimes measures us by things we don't choose, like the color of our skin or the place we come from. For me, facing racism was facing a form of pain I didn't understand, one that questioned my worth simply for being who I was. What does racism do to our identity? Identity is a fragile construction, especially in youth. We form ourselves from what we hear from others, from what we learn through their looks and words. When I first experienced racism, I felt as if they were trying to tear something out of me, something essential. They looked at me and judged me without knowing what was in my heart. Why should someone have to carry the weight of an identity imposed by others? During my youth, I faced comments and looks that made me feel like a stranger. In my own environment, there were tough moments when the world seemed to be made of invisible walls that separated me from others. I felt they were telling me that I didn't belong, and that feeling was like a stone on my chest. But at the same time, a small spark was born within me, a conviction that I had a value of my own that didn't depend on the opinion of others. How can you heal such a deep and persistent wound? That's the challenge. Racism leaves invisible scars. Yes, but it also gives us the opportunity to discover our true power. Facing that discrimination was painful, without a doubt. There were nights when I wondered if it was worth continuing to try to fit in, if perhaps it was better to give up and accept that I would always be seen as an outsider. But instead, I decided I would not allow those experiences to define who I learned to transform that pain into a source of strength. It wasn't easy, and the process wasn't fast. With every hurtful comment, every contemptuous look, I learned to trust in my own worth. I realized that no one but me could decide who I was, that my identity should not depend on the perception of others. It was an internal journey, a reconciliation with myself, in which I discovered that I had the freedom to be whoever I wanted to be, despite what the world told me. Why does rejection based on who we are affect us so much? Because being rejected for who we are touches us at the deepest level of our being. It's as if they are questioning our essence, our humanity. When someone rejects you for something you can't change, like the color of your skin, it's easy to fall into an abyss of doubt. But I understood that I shouldn't carry those opinions. I learned that those who judged me were prisoners of their own limited ideas, and that I shouldn't allow their words to become the chains that tied me down. Remembering those moments, I feel that every emotional wound was a test that allowed me to build an internal strength. It was as if the world was trying to teach me a harsh but necessary lesson that a freedom consists in living without fear of others' judgment, being able to see value in ourselves when others cannot. How do we find forgiveness after such unjust experiences? Forgiveness is one of the hardest things to grant, but also one of the most powerful. For a long time, I held resentment toward those who made me feel small, toward those who judged me without knowing me. I felt anger that was sometimes stronger than any other emotion, but that anger became a burden, something that kept me from moving forward. I learned that forgiveness does not mean forgetting or justifying what happened. It means freeing ourselves from the weight we carry. I lost so much time carrying that burden, allowing resentment to darken my soul, until one day I decided I no longer wanted to be a prisoner of those feelings. I let go of the grudge, and with it, I felt my heart grow lighter. It wasn't easy, but it was the first step toward the peace I had been searching for. What lessons can we draw from facing racism? Perhaps the most important lesson I learned is that a person's worth is not defined by the judgment of others. Through the wounds inflicted on me, I discovered that I could choose how to respond. To those experiences, I could either let them break me or allow myself to grow from them. Today I look back and see how each of those scars helped me become who I am. Racism tried to impose an identity on me based on prejudice, but in the end, it revealed my true identity, the one built from within, the one that cannot be taken away. Those experiences taught me not to let the world dictate who I am or what I'm worth. I learned to defend my essence and value my story. Is it possible to heal completely? Healing does not mean erasing the past, but finding peace in it. Today, I know that those experiences do not define me, that they are not a reflection of who I am, but of what others could not see. Healing is remembering without pain, looking back and feeling proud of having overcome each obstacle. Every day is an opportunity to free myself a little more, to accept my story, and to transform those scars into emblems of strength. Overcoming pain, the transformation in the mirror. Sometimes the greatest challenge we face is not in the outside world, but in the gaze staring back at us in the mirror. Looking ourselves in the eye and seeing who we truly are can be harder than any external trial. I discovered that, to overcome pain, I first had to accept what I saw in front of me, a reflection of my fears, my insecurities, and ultimately, my true strength. Why can the mirror be such a feared enemy? It is easy to avoid those who criticize us or hide from the opinions of others, but we cannot run away from ourselves. In that reflection, we are vulnerable, and the image we see is not always kind. For a long time, I avoided looking at myself because I feared what the mirror would reveal. But pain has a curious way of searching for truth, of pushing us to confront what we have hidden. In that sense, the mirror became both my first ally and my first challenge. One day, I forced myself to stay there, staring without looking away. It was as if I could see the weight of every painful experience, every blow, and every defeat. In that gaze, I recognized the person who had endured rejection, loneliness, and fear. In that reflection was the child who had been lost and the adult who had fought to find purpose. It was then that I understood transformation had to begin from within, from that silent confrontation in front of the mirror. How do we turn pain into strength? Transforming pain is not something that happens overnight. It is like chiseling a statue out of marble day by day. Each time I faced the mirror, I began to recognize the parts of me that needed healing, the parts that had been shaped, not broken, by pain. I realized that I could not erase the pain, but I could use it as a tool to build something new. I started with small steps. Each morning I told myself something positive, something affirming my worth. At first it was hard to believe those words. They felt foreign. But over time, they became truths that resonated within me. I realized that transformation is not about ignoring pain, but about embracing it and allowing it to teach us. Pain, when accepted, becomes a teacher, a guide showing us the path to strength. Why is it important to accept our vulnerability? Accepting our vulnerability means accepting that we are human. For a long time, I thought strength meant resisting, without showing weakness, hiding my wounds. But the mirror taught me another lesson. Taught me that true strength lies in being able to see our weaknesses without fear. To look at ourselves and say, this is who I am, and I still deserve love, respect, and peace. As I faced my vulnerability, I realized that pain was not a barrier, but a bridge and invitation to dive deeper into myself, to understand myself in ways I never had before. Each time I accepted a part of myself I had once rejected, I felt the weight inside me grow lighter. The mirror stopped being a judge and became an ally. It's a safe place where I could acknowledge both my shadows and my light. How can we build a new identity from our wounds? Every scar tells a story, and within those stories lie the seeds of a new identity. I realized that each of my wounds left a mark, but each also taught me something invaluable. I began building my identity from those lessons, from the understanding that every blow had made me stronger, every fall had taught me to rise again. It was a process of reconstruction, taking my experiences and turning them into foundations. Each day in front of the mirror, I reaffirmed my commitment to myself. I promised not to let the past define my future. At first, these promises felt like mere words, but over time, they became actions changes I could see and feel. I began to become the person I had always wanted to be, someone not defined by wounds, but by the ability to overcome them. What does it really mean to overcome? Pain? Overcoming pain does not mean forgetting or denying it. It means learning to live with it without letting it control our lives. It means looking in the mirror and seeing not just the scars, but also the person we have become because of them. It means recognizing that pain is part of our story, but not the whole story. Today, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see only the shadows of the past. I see someone who has learned to love, respect, and value themselves despite everything. I see someone who has chosen to be their own support, their own inspiration. And in that reflection, I find the peace I had long sought. Is complete healing possible? Healing is a continuous journey. There is no moment when we can simply say we are fully healed, because there will always be new experiences and new challenges. True healing lies in learning to live with what we have been, in accepting our past, and in finding within it the wisdom to build our future, the strength of purpose, inspiration to persevere. There comes a point in life when we need something greater than ourselves to keep moving forward. That something is purpose, the reason that gives us strength to face each day, each challenge, and each pain. I realized that after facing so many struggles, what truly sustained me was that purpose, a reason that transcended the wounds and called me to keep going. Why does purpose have so much power over us? Purpose is like an inner compass. It gives us direction when the path seems dark, when life challenges us, and we feel we have no strength to continue. I have often asked myself why some people give up while others keep going. And the answer always seems to come back to purpose. When you have a clear reason for doing something, a reason that resonates deep within your being, pain and difficulties lose some of their weight. In my case, finding that purpose was a slow process, full of questions. I wondered if my life had any meaning beyond the hardships I had faced. Why was I here? What did I have to offer? It was a silent but constant search, one that became clearer. With each experience, each wound, each scar, how do we discover purpose? Purpose is not something we find overnight. It is like a seed that grows slowly, nourished by our experiences, values, and dreams. I discovered that my purpose was to use my story to inspire, to help others find their strength. Sometimes what hurts us the most is also what has the most to teach us. In my case, my struggles became the driving force behind my purpose. I realized that life had prepared me through each fall and each rise for a purpose greater than myself. It was not just about me, but about what I could give and share. Looking at my life's reflection in the mirror, I saw someone who had found a reason to keep going, a sense that gave strength to each step and each day. How does life change when we find purpose? Everything makes sense. Difficulties become necessary challenges, and pain turns into valuable lessons. When I found my purpose, I discovered an inexhaustible source of energy. No matter how tired or defeated I felt, there was always something pushing me to take one more step. I felt that every experience, every pain, and every failure had been preparing me, giving me the tools I would need along the way. Purpose is what gives us strength when motivation fades. It is what drives us to keep going, even when the world tells us to stop. In moments of weakness and doubt, I remembered why I had begun this journey, and immediately I felt strength return within me. My purpose became my anchor, my guide. What happens when we lose sight of our purpose? It is normal to stray sometimes, to forget why we started. It happens to all of us. In moments of despair, when difficulties seem insurmountable, it is easy to lose sight of purpose. But I learned that purpose is never truly lost, simply hides behind daily worries waiting for us to reconnect with it. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I thought I was incapable of fulfilling what I had set out to do. But in those dark moments, I always remembered why I had begun. I remembered that my purpose was not just something that inspired, was my responsibility, something I had to honor despite the difficulties. Each time I returned to that idea, I found new strength to persevere. How can we make purpose a constant source of inspiration? Purpose is not just an idea, it is a daily practice. I learned that it is not enough to have a purpose. It must be nurtured, remembered, and lived out in every decision. I began asking myself, with every action, does this bring me closer to or further from my purpose? That daily practice of connecting with my reason for being became a ritual that gave meaning to each day. Every morning, I committed to living according to that purpose, to doing something that reflected that mission. Sometimes it was something small, a simple act of kindness, a step toward my goals. But each of those small acts was an affirmation of my purpose, a way of telling myself that I was on the right path. What final lesson can we learn from the power of purpose? The most valuable lesson I have learned is that when we find our purpose, we discover a strength that goes beyond ourselves. We realize that our lives have an impact, that each of us has something unique to offer. Purpose is ultimately the gift we give to the world, the way we turn our experiences into something that transcends. Today, I know that my purpose is my greatest strength. I wake up each day with the conviction that no matter what challenges I face, I have a reason to keep going. Purpose is the bridge between pain and healing, between struggle and peace. With each step I take, with each act of perseverance, I reaffirm that purpose and feel my life fill with deep and lasting meaning, reconciliation with fear, the path to self-discipline. Fear is a constant companion, even though we often try to ignore it or avoid it. I have learned, however, that fear is not an enemy to defeat, but an essential part of our humanity that calls us to grow and discover our true strength. Reconciling with fear was a decisive step in my life, a choice that led me to understand that the path to self-discipline begins when we make peace with what frightens us. Why does fear scare us so much? Fear has a way of paralyzing us, making us question our decisions, doubt our abilities, and even turn away from our goals. For years, I tried to ignore it, as if by not acknowledging it, I could erase it from my life. But the more I avoided it, the stronger it became, thriving in the shadows. In the corners of my mind I refused to look at. Accepting fear was a slow process. At first it was difficult to look at it directly, as if doing so meant admitting weakness. But over time, I learned to see fear differently. Instead of running, I decided to observe it, to understand it, even to question it. I realized that each fear I carried was an invitation to discover something deep about myself. How does fear become an ally? Fear has a purpose. It warns us of dangers, keeps us alert, and in many cases helps us prepare better. But it can also become an ally when we stop seeing it as a barrier and start seeing it as a guide. I learned to ask myself, what is this fear teaching me? Sometimes the answer was clarity, other times patience, but deep down, fear always revealed what I truly wanted to achieve. That's how fear stopped paralyzing me and became a signal that I was moving toward something important. Each time I felt fear, I took it as a sign I was stepping out of my comfort zone, expanding my limits. That perception completely changed my relationship with fear because I understood that behind it lay the possibility of growth. What is the connection between fear and self-discipline? Self-discipline is born when we make conscious choices, not because they are easy, but because we know they are right. Fear gives us many reasons to quit, to avoid effort, to retreat to the familiar. But self-discipline arises when, despite fear, we choose to keep going. I realized that each act of discipline was an act of reconciliation with fear, decision not to let it control me. I began setting small daily goals to face those fears. At first they were simple things. Waking up early, staying consistent with my commitments, exercising despite fatigue. Over time, these small decisions built a habit of self-discipline, a routine that kept me focused and mentally stronger. How can we strengthen our self-discipline in the face of fear? The key is consistency. It's not about achieving big changes overnight, but about building small acts of discipline that keep us steady on the path. Each time I made a difficult choice despite fear, I strengthened my self-discipline a little more. It was like building an inner wall, brick by brick, protecting me from doubts and excuses. I discovered that self-discipline is a muscle that must be exercised. At first, it may feel difficult, and we often fall into the temptation to give up. But over time, each act of discipline builds a structure of inner strength, a foundation that sustains our decisions and allows us to face even the greatest challenges. That's how fear stopped being a threat and became an opportunity for growth. What happens when we finally accept fear? Accepting fear is liberating. By acknowledging it, we discover it is not as big or insurmountable as it seemed. We stop seeing it as an obstacle and start seeing it as part of our growth. For me, accepting fear was like taking a heavy weight off my shoulders. I no longer had to constantly fight against it. I just had to learn to walk alongside it. That reconciliation gave me a peace I had never experienced before. It allowed me to make decisions without doubting myself, without endlessly questioning. Self-discipline became a source of strength, a daily choice to live according to my values. Despite whatever fears might arise along the way, I understood that fear would always be there, but it no longer had the power to control me. How can we apply this lesson to daily life? Each day we face decisions that require self-discipline, and within each of those decisions lies an opportunity. To reconcile with our fears can begin with small actions, keeping our promises, finishing what we start, staying committed to our goals even when fear tries to distract us. Each small victory over fear is one more step toward a life of self-discipline and purpose. Today, when I look back, I see that fear, far from being my enemy, became my teacher. It showed me that I am capable of facing any challenge, that I have the strength to keep going even when doubts creep in. The self-discipline I developed allows me to live each day with intention, with the conviction that every step I take is an affirmation of my worth and my purpose. The art of overcoming, facing suffering. Overcoming and suffering, two words that seem so distant, yet are so deeply intertwined. I learned that overcoming does not mean the absence of suffering, but the ability to face it and transform it. It is not about eliminating pain, but about learning to live with it in a way that strengthens us. This is an invitation to see suffering not as an enemy, but as a teacher that reveals what we are capable of enduring and achieving. Why does suffering seem to be an inevitable part of life? Suffering is inevitable because it is part of the human experience. We all go through moments of pain, of loss, of doubt. Life, in its essence, is constant change, and suffering often arises from our resistance to those changes. For a long time, I tried fleeing from suffering, avoiding it at all costs. But I discovered that true power lies in accepting it, in facing it head-on, and in asking, what can I learn from this? I understood that suffering is like a flame. It can destroy, or it can light the way. The choice depends on how we decide to face it. When I stopped seeing it as something I had to avoid at all costs, and began to view it as a natural part of my process, my perspective changed. Instead of resisting, I began to accept those dark moments and to search for the hidden lesson within them. How can we find meaning in suffering? Finding meaning in suffering is one of life's greatest challenges, but it is also one of the most powerful keys to growth. When I found myself in difficult moments where everything seemed bleak and hopeless, I asked myself, what can I gain from this experience? What can I learn that will help me become a better version of myself? By asking these questions, I began to see suffering from a different perspective. I discovered that, though painful, each difficult moment was an opportunity to grow, to go deeper within myself, and to strengthen my character. Overcoming comes when we understand that every challenge makes us stronger, that every trial prepares us for the next stage of our journey. Why is it so important to develop resilience in the face of suffering? Resilience is the ability to endure, to remain firm when life challenges us. It is what allows us to overcome adversity and keep moving forward, no matter how difficult the path may be. In my experience, resilience is built through suffering, not in spite of it. Every time we face a difficulty and choose to continue, we develop an inner resistance that strengthens us for future challenges. I remember a time in my life when everything seemed to go wrong. Every step I took seemed to lead me to a new obstacle, a new pain. But each time I chose to keep going, refusing to give up. I felt something inside me grow stronger and steadier. That resilience was the result of facing suffering rather than running from it. Over time, I discovered that every moment of pain was actually another step toward growth. How can we learn to live with suffering without being consumed by it? The art of overcoming lies in learning to coexist with suffering without allowing it to dominate us. It's about finding a balance between accepting pain and at the same time not letting it define our lives. I learned to do this by cultivating patience and self-care. I reminded myself that suffering was just a stage, a chapter in my story, not the end. By allowing myself to feel the pain without rejecting it or hiding from it, I began to discover a serenity I had never known before. I stopped seeing suffering as punishment and began to see it as an experience that could shape and teach me. Thus, pain stopped being a burden I carried on my shoulders and became a tool for my growth. What does it really mean to overcome suffering? 2. Overcome suffering does not mean to forget it or to erase it from our lives. It means learning to walk with it, to find peace in the middle of the storm. Overcoming suffering is looking it in the eyes and saying, I recognize you, accept you. But I do not allow you to control me. It is discovering that we can keep moving forward, even with the wounds and scars it leaves behind. Today, when I remember those painful moments, I feel deep gratitude. It was those challenges that allowed me to grow. It taught me the true meaning of overcoming. Because overcoming is not just an outcome, it is a daily practice, a commitment to ourselves not to be defeated by circumstances. How can we apply the art of overcoming in our daily lives? Every day, life gives us opportunities to practice overcoming, maybe a small setback, a disappointment, or an unexpected challenge. In each of these situations, we have the chance to decide how to react. We can let frustration take over, or we can see them as opportunities to strengthen our resilience, to learn something new about ourselves. Overcoming suffering is an art because it requires practice, patience, and dedication. It is not something we achieve overnight. It is a path, a daily choice to see every difficulty as an opportunity to grow. Today, suffering no longer scares me. I know it is only part of the journey, a reminder that I am capable of facing any challenge life places before me by finding inner strength beyond. Despair has a unique way of making us feel trapped, as if we were in a windowless room with no way out. It's a feeling we've all experienced at some point, but in my darkest moments, I discovered something that changed my life. There exists an inner strength, a power that does not depend on external circumstances. That power was within me, waiting to be discovered, waiting for me to call upon it. What is inner strength? Inner strength is that spark of resilience, that silent voice that pushes us forward when everything seems lost. It is not physical strength, nor external security. It is something much deeper, a belief rooted in the core of our being. For a long time, I didn't know that strength was there. I thought my ability to endure depended on my achievements, my success, or what others thought of me. But life taught me that true strength does not come from what we have, but from who we are. I remember a particularly dark day, a moment when I felt I couldn't go on. Circumstances seemed overwhelming, and despair had become a constant shadow in my life. Then, in the midst of that darkness, I felt a small spark, a sense that I was not alone, that something inside me still wanted to fight. That spark was my inner strength, and it was enough to give me the courage to continue. How do we find inner strength in the midst of despair? Inner strength is not found in quick solutions or easy answers. To find it, we must first accept despair, look at it directly, and recognize its presence. Only when we allow ourselves to feel without judgment, without fleeing, can we discover that inner power. For me, it was an act of surrender, a moment. When I stopped fighting against my emotions and began to explore them, I asked myself difficult questions, questions that took me deep within my being. What do I truly desire? What sustains me? As I asked these questions, I began to see that inner strength is not found outside of us, nor can it be given by others. It arises from our very essence, from our capacity to be honest with ourselves, to recognize both our weaknesses and our strengths. Why is it important to trust in our own strength? Self-trust is the foundation of all overcoming. When we learn to trust in our inner strength, we no longer depend on external factors to feel at peace. We no longer need validation from others or perfect circumstances to be well. I discovered that by trusting my own strength, I could face any situation with calm, because I knew that no matter what happened, I had within me everything I needed. To move forward, that trust allowed me to see every challenge as an opportunity, every obstacle as an invitation to grow. I began to live with a quiet certainty, a confidence that did not come from achievements or external approval, but from the certainty that I had an unbreakable strength within me. Inner strength became my refuge, my anchor in moments of storm. What happens when we begin to live from that inner strength? Living from inner strength changes our perspective on life. We become more resilient, more capable of facing pain, loss, and difficulties. By finding that strength within me, I began to see that despair, although intense, was only a temporary state. Each time I connected with my inner strength, I felt more capable of facing life with courage, of embracing both moments of light and moments of shadow. I no longer feared despair. I knew that even if it came, it did not have the power to destroy me, because my true power did not depend on my circumstances, but on my decision to keep moving forward. Finding that strength allowed me to stop searching outside for what I had always carried within. It gave me the freedom to live authentically, to face life from a place of peace. How can we practice connecting with our inner strength in daily life? Connecting with our inner strength is a daily practice, a habit we must cultivate with patience and dedication. I began to dedicate a few minutes each day to silence, to listening to my inner self without distractions. These moments became my refuge, my space for recon. In those instants, I remembered my own worth, my capacity to overcome any challenge. Each day I repeated a simple affirmation: I have within me the strength to face whatever comes. Repeating this phrase made me feel my confidence grow, my inner strength strengthen. This simple practice allowed me to cultivate a deep peace that did not depend on what happened outside, but on my ability to trust my own being. What final lesson can we learn about inner strength? The most powerful lesson I learned is that inner strength is our essence. It is what allows us to live with purpose, with courage, and with peace. Finding that strength is a gift we give ourselves, a reminder that, in any circumstance, we are capable of moving forward. Inner strength gives us the power to overcome despair, to live with hope, to be true to ourselves. Today, I know that inner strength is my greatest treasure. It is what gives me the serenity to face each day with confidence, knowing that no matter what happens, I have within me everything I need to live fully, beyond despair, beyond difficulties. My inner strength is the light that guides me, the anchor that sustains me, and the source of my peace, physical and mental transformation. From pain to pride, true transformation does not occur only in the body, nor only in the mind. It's a process that involves both. It is a dance between the physical and the mental that leads us to discover the power we have to change to grow and to strengthen ourselves. My journey of transformation began with pain, a mix of physical and emotional wounds. But with each step, with each effort, that pain turned into pride. A pride that arose from knowing I was moving toward the best version of myself. That understanding taught me that true change requires full effort from the very beginning. It wasn't easy. There were days when my body gave up and others when my mind seemed to doubt every step. But every time I overcame those barriers, I felt an indescribable satisfaction, a certainty that I was moving forward in something much deeper than just physical change. How can we transform pain into a source of pride? Pain, when faced with courage, becomes a reminder of our ability to endure. At the beginning of my transformation, pain was in every muscle, in every thought of doubt that arose in my mind. But I decided to see that pain not as a sign of weakness, but as a sign that I was advancing, that I was expanding my limits. Every time I managed to complete a hard workout, every time I overcame an obstacle, I felt pain turn into pride. I realized that every drop of sweat, every minute of effort, was an investment in my own strength. That pride was the reward of having worked for something, of having given my best despite the difficulties. I began to value that pain because it was tangible proof of my growth. What role does discipline play in the process of transformation? Discipline is the key to all transformation. Without it, our desires remain dreams. With it, our dreams become reality. In this process, discipline was my constant companion, the force that pushed me forward every day, even when pain and fatigue tried to stop me. I began to establish daily routines, small habits that reminded me of my commitment to myself. Each morning I woke up with a clear purpose, with a determination to fulfill what I had promised myself. That discipline gave me a sense of control, a certainty that I was building something meaningful. Over time, that routine became a pillar in my life, the foundation of both my physical and mental transformation. How does our perception of ourselves change through transformation? As I progressed, I began to see a version of myself I had never known before, someone stronger, more confident, more aware of their own power. The physical transformation revealed a strength that had always been there but that I had never discovered until then. And that new image of myself was reflected in my mind, my thoughts, and my self-confidence. Every achievement, every step forward taught me something about my ability to push beyond limits. I realized that effort and discipline not only made me stronger physically, but also strengthened my character. Transformation was like looking into a mirror and discovering a new face, the face of someone who had learned to value their own effort, someone ready to face the world without fear. What does it really mean to feel proud of oneself? True pride doesn't come from external validation. It comes from knowing that we gave our very best. During my transformation, I discovered that pride wasn't in praise or visible achievements. It was in those silent moments in the stillness. After a day of effort, when I could look back and see how far I had come, that pride was a gift. I gave myself a confirmation that I was on the right path. Feeling proud of my physical and mental transformation wasn't just about appearance or strength. It was a reflection of my commitment, my decisions, my obstacles, and the resilience I had built step by step. That pride was the culmination of a process of self-discovery, of understanding that every effort had been worth it. How can we apply this transformation to our daily lives? Physical and mental transformation is not just for moments of challenge, is a way of living every day. We have the opportunity to grow, to strengthen ourselves, to keep building the best version of who we are. We can apply transformation in our daily choices, in the way we face problems, in the consistency we bring to our goals. Today, transformation is a fundamental part of my life. Every day I seek opportunities to grow, to strengthen both my body and my mind. This journey has taught me that transformation has no end. It is a continuous path, a constant commitment to ourselves and to our best version. The pride I feel is the reflection of every effort, every step, and it reminds me that I can always give more, that I can always keep moving forward. But it is not an enemy. I discovered that pain is simply a signal, an indication that we are pushing our limits, that we are exploring unknown territory. By learning to accept pain instead of resisting it, I was able to transform it into a tool. I no longer saw it as an obstacle, but as proof that I was moving forward. There were moments when the pain felt unbearable, moments when it seemed I couldn't go on. But by accepting that pain, by seeing it as a necessary part of the process, something within me changed. I reminded myself that pain was temporary, that every second of effort was bringing me closer to my goals, to the best version of myself. How can we apply the resilience learned in training to daily life? The resilience we develop in physical training doesn't stay in the gym. It becomes a strength we carry with us into every aspect of life. I learned that every time I faced a challenge in training, I was also strengthening my mind to face the challenges of life. When we get used to enduring pain, to embracing effort, to not giving up, that mindset becomes our foundation for facing any situation. I began to see each challenge in my life as an extension of my training. The difficult moments of my daily life became mental workout tests of my willpower, of my endurance. That connection allowed me to see life as a continuous process of growth and self-improvement. The same principles of discipline and resilience that I practiced in training helped me stay grounded in moments of doubt or discouragement. What is the reward of overcoming extreme training? The true reward of extreme training is not just the physical change, although it is visible and gratifying. The deeper reward is the internal change, the satisfaction of knowing that we are capable of far more than we imagined. Every workout completed, every challenge overcome, is an affirmation of our strength, of our ability to endure. I felt a deep pride every time I finished a difficult workout, not because of the physical results, because of the proof of my willpower. I knew that by confronting my limits and surpassing them, I was building a stronger, more confident version of myself. That pride, that satisfaction, was a reward no external achievement could ever match. How can we cultivate willpower and resilience in daily life? Willpower and resilience are habits, skills we can practice in every aspect of life. Every time we face a challenge, an uncomfortable situation, we can choose to endure, to push a little more, to try a little harder. By cultivating this mindset of resilience, we don't just become physically stronger, we become emotionally more resilient today. Whenever I face an obstacle, I remember those moments in training, those seconds, when it felt like I couldn't go on, and yet I did. I remind myself that I am capable of overcoming any challenge because I have learned to trust my willpower, my capacity to endure. Extreme training taught me that true strength is not in the body, but in the mind and the heart. Scars that forge. How pain drives change. Pain leaves marked scars that we carry with us as witnesses of our deepest experiences. But beyond their appearance, scars tell a story of transformation, of moments when we chose to move forward despite the wounds. I discovered that every scar I carry is not just a reminder of the pain I endured, but of the strength I found in those moments. In each of those scars, I see the power of change, the reflection of a will to be reborn from adversity. Why does pain drive change? Pain has a unique way of capturing our attention. It wakes us from our comfort zone, forces us to question what we take for granted, and pushes us to seek new ways of living. In my life, every moment of pain has been an invitation to change a signal that something within me needed to transform. At first, like many, I tried to avoid pain, to hide from it. But over time, I understood that pain was not my enemy, it was my teacher. I remember an especially difficult period when everything seemed to collapse around me. It was a pain that took my breath away, that made each day feel like an impossible challenge. In those moments, I asked myself if pain had any purpose, if it served for anything beyond making me feel vulnerable. But the more I explored that question, the more I understood that pain was the catalyst for my change. It pushed me to face what I didn't want to see, to find strength deep within myself. How can we transform pain into an opportunity for growth? The key lies in our perspective. I learned that pain can be a powerful tool when we accept it and observe it with courage. Instead of seeing it as punishment, I began to see it as an invitation to become stronger, to discover new dimensions of myself that would otherwise remain hidden. I decided to ask myself what I could learn from each painful experience. What lessons were hidden behind each scar? While by doing so, I realized that each wound taught me something valuable. Some taught me patience, others resilience, and others the importance of accepting my vulnerability. That acceptance was the first step toward true transformation, toward a change that not only shaped my life, but also the way I related to others. Why are scars so powerful? Scars are powerful because they are witnesses of our story, of the moments when we chose to keep going. They are marks of our challenges, of the trials we have overcome. When I look at my scars, I don't just see the pain I experienced, I see the decision not to give up, the choice to turn those moments into lessons. Each scar is proof that I was capable of facing pain, that I overcame it and came out stronger. At one point in my life, I used to see scars as reminders of my failures, of my weaknesses. But with time, I changed that perspective. I began to see them as symbols of strength, as emblems of my journey. Today, when I see a scar, I feel deep gratitude because I know that without that pain, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Each mark tells a story of transformation, of change, and of growth. How can we live with our scars without letting them define us? Living with our scars is an act of reconciliation, of acceptance. It is not about ignoring them or forgetting what they represent. It is about integrating them as part of our story. Every scar is a reminder, yes, but it does not have to define us. We can choose to see them not as limitations, but as testimonies of our ability to overcome pain and move forward. I have learned to look at my scars from a place of self-love, to see in them a story of courage and persistence. By accepting my scars, I found peace. I stopped feeling ashamed of my painful experiences and began to see them as pillars of my strength. That acceptance freed me from the need to hide, from pretending the pain never existed. By accepting my scars, I gave myself permission to be authentic, to live from a place of truth. What final lesson can we learn from pain and scars? The deepest lesson I've learned is that pain does not destroy us, it transforms us. It gives us the opportunity to reinvent ourselves, to rebuild. From our experiences, that our body and our mind need moments of recovery. By accepting my limits, I learned to respect my process, to understand that resilience is not about pushing myself to the breaking point, but about maintaining a balance between effort and rest. How do we face the feeling of vulnerability and collapse? Feeling vulnerable can be unsettling, especially when we are used to being strong. In that moment of collapse, I felt a vulnerability that left me exposed, stripped bare before my own limitations. But by allowing myself to feel that vulnerability, I discovered a different kind of strength, one that didn't come from resistance, but from acceptance. I realized that recognizing my moments of weakness was not a sign of defeat, but proof of honesty with myself. I felt a deep peace in accepting that sometimes the body and the mind need to stop, that it is valid to say enough without guilt. Vulnerability taught me to be more compassionate with myself, to understand that every limit is an invitation to listen to ourselves and to take care of our well-being. Asterisk, what can we learn from moments of collapse? Every collapse is a lesson in humility and self-knowledge. In those moments when we feel we have reached the limit, we are given the opportunity to rediscover ourselves, to see who we really are when there is no strength left. Instead of seeing those moments as failures, I began to see them as turning points, as reminders that the path to true strength includes pauses and reflection. I learned that in those moments of extreme exhaustion, we can pause and reflect on our motives, on what we truly want to achieve. That introspection allowed me to understand that my goal was not to be invincible, but to learn how to be resilient in real life, where each challenge offers us a lesson. Moments of collapse became spaces to redefine my purpose and reconnect with my deepest desires. Is it possible to rebuild after a collapse? Absolutely. In fact, every collapse is an opportunity for reconstruction, for rising again with clearer perspective and renewed strength. After that physical and mental breakdown, I understood that I had the choice to give up or to learn and continue. I chose the second path, but this time with a different mindset. I decided to build resilience that respected my limits, that honored my well-being. I began to see every rest as an important part of my growth, as an essential component of my success. Instead of avoiding collapse, I began to integrate moments of recovery into my life, moments in which I could recharge my strength and reflect on my journey. Rebuilding after a collapse is like reigniting a flame with renewed energy and a deeper understanding of what we truly need to thrive. What does resilience really mean? True resilience is not about pushing endlessly, but about knowing when to move forward and when to stop. It is about being honest with ourselves about our needs and respecting our own rhythms. Resilience is ultimately a practice of self-love, understanding that our strength is not measured by how much we can endure, but by our ability to care for ourselves along the journey. Today, I know that my resilience has transformed. It is no longer based on constant struggle, but on harmony between effort and rest, between progress and reflection. I have learned that true strength is knowing when to stop, when to listen to our body and mind, and when to allow ourselves simply to be without judgment. That is the essence of lasting resilience, of the strength that stays with us through every stage of life. Rituals of strength. Building resilience day by day. Resilience is not a trait we are born with. It is a skill cultivated every day, in every small decision and every act of will. I learned that strength does not arise in moments of crisis, but in daily rituals, in the simple habits that build a solid foundation. Resilience, like a muscle, needs to be trained constantly. And it is in those everyday moments where we find the true strength to face any challenge. What role do rituals play in building resilience? Rituals are small anchors, moments where we pause to remember our purpose and our goals. They're like support points that hold us when life becomes uncertain or difficult. In my case, I began to establish daily rituals to remind myself who I was and in which direction I wanted to move forward. They were simple acts, but each of them connected me with my inner strength. One of my daily rituals is morning reflection. Each morning, I take a few minutes to sit in silence, breathe deeply, and recall my objectives. I ask myself questions that anchor me to my purpose. Why do I do what I do? What do I want to build today? That simple act, that brief moment fills me with clarity and prepares me to face the day with determination. How can rituals help us overcome moments of weakness? Moments of weakness are inevitable, but rituals offer us a refuge, a space of stability in the middle of the storm. When facing challenges, it is easy to feel lost, to doubt ourselves or our abilities. In those moments, rituals are like a compass, a guide that reminds us of our strength and gives us the necessary drive to keep going. There were moments in my life when I felt on the verge of giving up, when pressure and exhaustion seemed too much. But every time I returned to my rituals, every time I took that time to reconnect, I felt my strength return. My rituals became a reminder that even when circumstances are difficult, I still have the power to choose how to respond. That consistency, that discipline, strengthened my resilience more than any external achievement ever could. What types of rituals can help strengthen resilience? Rituals can be as varied as we are. There is no single formula. Each person can create their own, according to their needs and lifestyle. For me, some of the most powerful rituals are those that connect me with my purpose and allow me to care for my physical and mental well-being, in addition to morning reflection. Another ritual I have integrated into my life is daily physical exercise. It doesn't matter if it's an intense workout or a simple walk. The act of moving reminds me that I am capable of overcoming my own limits. Each time I train, I feel my body and my mind grow stronger, my resilience expanding. Another of my rituals is writing. At the end of the day, I write down my thoughts, my achievements, and the lessons I've learned. That moment of writing is an opportunity for self-evaluation, to understand in which aspects I can improve and in which areas I have advanced. How can we maintain consistency in these rituals? Consistency is the secret of rituals. To maintain it is important to have a clear motivation. First, it may be difficult to establish a routine daily life, and distractions can pull us away from our rituals. But when we have a deep reason, a purpose that moves us, consistency becomes easier. For me, the motivation was my desire to become stronger, more resilient. I knew that each ritual, each act of consistency, was bringing me closer to the version of myself I wanted to become. As I began to see results, as I felt my strength grow day by day, motivation became natural. I realized that every ritual was an investment in my personal growth, and that thought helped me stay firm even on the most complicated days. What impact do rituals of resilience have on our daily lives? Rituals of resilience transform our lives in a profound way. By maintaining these daily habits, we not only strengthen our character, but also develop a mindset of growth and perseverance. Each ritual becomes a stepping stone toward a stronger version of ourselves, a version capable of facing challenges with confidence and calm. I noticed that as I practiced my rituals, my way of facing problems changed. I no longer reacted with anxiety or despair. Instead, I found myself approaching each challenge with a calm and clarity I had never known before. These rituals gave me a solid foundation, a sense of stability that accompanied me in every situation, in every moment of uncertainty. How can we begin to build our own rituals of strength? Starting to build rituals of strength is as simple as identifying those practices that reconnect us with our purpose and our inner peace. They don't need to be grand gestures. Sometimes the smallest actions have the greatest impact. You can begin by choosing a moment of the day to reflect, to give thanks, to breathe deeply, and to visualize your goals. The important thing is that these rituals carry personal meaning. They remind you why it is important to keep moving forward. Today, my rituals are a fundamental part of my life. They are not tasks to be checked off, nor obligations, but sacred moments that connect me with my essence. Through these rituals, I feel my resilience strengthening each day, my mind sharpening, and my spirit lifting. These small acts, these daily practices have taught me that true strength is built consistently, step by step, in every decision we make to take care of ourselves and our purpose. Mistakes that question gave me immense freedom, a sense of power over my life. By letting go of the fear of failure, I realized I could dare to dream big, to live boldly without the chains of external expectations. Living without limits meant accepting that failure was a possibility, but not a barrier. How does failure strengthen us on our path of growth? Failure strengthens us because it shows us that we are capable of getting back up, of moving forward despite the falls. Every time we face failure and choose to try again, we are building deep resilience, a trust in our ability to adapt and improve. On my journey, each failure was an opportunity to see what I was made of, to discover my true strength. When I stopped fearing failure, I discovered a resistance I didn't know I had. It no longer mattered if something went wrong. What mattered was that I had the will to learn and to try again. That strength allowed me to face every challenge with confidence, knowing that even if the result wasn't what I expected, I would always have something valuable to gain. Failure became my source of power, the certainty that no matter what happened, I could always rise again. What lessons can we apply from these failures in our daily lives? Every failure carries with it a lesson, a teaching we can apply to every aspect of our lives. I learned that by accepting failure, I was freeing myself from expectations and from the pressure to be perfect, instead of trying to avoid mistakes. I allowed myself to be human, to experience, and to learn. This lesson helped me face life with a growth mindset, knowing that every experience, good or bad, was shaping me.
Ow.
Today, I apply this lesson every time I face a challenge, every time I set out to do something new. I no longer fear failing, because I know that no matter what happens, there will always be something valuable to learn. Living without fear of failure has given me a freedom that does not depend on the outcome, but on my willingness to try, to grow, and to become the best version of myself. How can we inspire others to live without limits? We can inspire others to live without limits by sharing our stories of failure and overcoming, by showing our falls, by being honest about the moments when we felt vulnerable. We remind others that failure is only a stage on the path to success. By living without fear of failing, we give others permission to do the same, to dare to dream and to try without the pressure of perfection. Every time I share my experiences, or every time I speak about my failures, I see how others find comfort and motivation. Failure becomes a tool of connection, a reminder that we are all on a path of learning. Living without limits is not just a personal choice. It is an act of inspiration. It's an invitation for others to also free themselves from fear and live a life without barriers. Legacy of an unbreakable mind, inspiration for the future. True strength is not something that disappears with time, is a legacy that remains. It's an inspiration for all those who walk the same path. An unbreakable mind not only transforms the life of the one who cultivates it, but also leaves marks on the world, signs that it is possible to live with determination and purpose, to face any adversity and emerge stronger, I discovered that resilience, when genuine, becomes a beacon that illuminates the way not only for oneself, but also for those seeking inspiration and guidance. What does it really mean to leave a legacy? Leaving a legacy is not about accumulating material achievements or gaining recognition. It is about living in a way that inspires others, showing them that despite challenges, we are all capable of reaching our best selves. I remember the moments when faced with difficult decisions or times of doubt, I found strength in the stories of those who had walked the path before me. Their experiences, their teachings, became a silent guide that reminded me it was possible to overcome any obstacle. Looking ahead, I understood that by cultivating an unbreakable mind, I was creating a legacy for those who would come after me. I knew that every act of resilience, every time I chose not to give up, I was building an example that could inspire someone else. That thought gave my life a new meaning, a purpose that went beyond my own goals. Living with the intention of leaving a legacy is, in essence, an invitation to be the best version of ourselves, not only for our own benefit, but to inspire others to do the same. How can we build an unbreakable mind that transcends time? Building an unbreakable mind is a process of self-knowledge, discipline, and perseverance. It is learning to see challenges as opportunities for growth. To face pain and adversity with a learning mindset, I realized that every difficult experience was an opportunity to strengthen my character, to become someone capable of withstanding any storm. Each trial, each obstacle I overcame, became a fundamental piece in the construction of that inner strength. I began to develop practices that helped me strengthen my mind, reminded me every day of my ability to endure and overcome. The end. I understood that an unbreakable mind is not the absence of doubts or fears. It is the ability to move forward despite them, to trust in our capacity to adapt and to carry on. That trust, that inner security, is what allows our strength to transcend time, becoming a legacy others can observe and follow. What impact does an unbreakable mind have on others? The impact of an unbreakable mind on others is profound and lasting. By living with resilience, without giving in to difficulties, we show others that it is possible to overcome any situation. Throughout my life, I saw how my attitude in moments of adversity influenced those around me. Every time I chose to face a challenge with calm and determination, I was sending a clear message. No matter how difficult the road, we can always keep moving forward. I discovered that people don't need speeches or promises, they need living examples, proof that resilience is possible. When someone sees another overcome difficulties, something inside them awakens a spark of hope and confidence in their own power. By building an unbreakable mind, we are not only transforming our own lives, we are leaving a positive impact, a silent inspiration for those who, at some point, may need that reminder of strength and perseverance. How can we live with purpose? To ensure that our legacy inspires others, living with purpose means making every decision with clear intention, aligned with our values and goals. I realized that to build an inspiring legacy, I needed to live according to my principles. Maintaining coherence between my words and my actions, every choice I made, every commitment I took on, became part of that legacy, a footprint of integrity and purpose. Today, every day I ask myself, am I living in a way that inspires others? That question helps me stay focused, to remember that my life is more than just my personal achievements or failures. Living with purpose means living for something greater than oneself. It means setting aside trivialities and focusing on what truly matters. This focus allows me to build a legacy of integrity, a reminder that true strength comes from living with coherence and passion. How can we pass on our legacy to future generations? Passing on our legacy to future generations does not require grand words or great gestures. It is about living in such a way that our story inspires on its own, showing through our actions that an unbreakable mind can face anything we can share. Our experiences, our life lessons, not as rules, but as testimonies of what is possible when we live with determination. Every time I speak with someone younger, every time I share a story of overcoming, I feel that I am passing on a fragment of that legacy. It is not about imposing my experiences, but offering them as a resource, as a reminder that despite challenges, each one of us has the power to create our own path. By passing on our legacy, we are reminding future generations that strength, resilience, and purpose are the most valuable tools they can carry with them. What final lesson can we draw from a life lived with an unbreakable mind? The final lesson is simple but profound. An unbreakable mind not only faces the present, but transforms the future. By living with determination, by facing each day with firm will, we are creating a legacy of inspiration and hope. That is the true wealth of a life fully lived, knowing that in the end, we have left a positive mark, a source of strength for those who follow. Today, I look ahead with deep gratitude. I know that my life, with its successes and failures, with its moments of joy and difficulty, has been proof of my ability to live without limits, to face every challenge with an unbreakable mind. That is the legacy I want to leave, a story of resilience and purpose. It's an inspiration for all who seek to live with authenticity and courage. If this audiobook has inspired you, imagine what you can discover with many more. Don't let knowledge and spiritual growth stop. Here, explore our complete playlist and immerse yourself in more transformative wisdom. And if you truly want to elevate your life with different perspectives on spirituality, I invite you to visit my channel, Chronicle of Knowledge, where you will find deep spiritual content to continue expanding your mind and your being. Miss the opportunity to keep transforming your reality. Take the next step now. Thank you very much.